Great, then we will get started. Thank you all for coming in. The Columbian is happy to welcome candidates for the state representative from the 49th District, position 2. Welcome to Carolyn Crain and Alishia Topper and Monica Stonier. Should note that fellow candidate Wade McLaren is not able to join us today, so but I'm sure we'll have an insightful discussion with the three of you. And just for clarification, this is the seat that Jim Moeller has held, and he is running for Congress, so it's an open seat. As you know, I'm Greg Jane. I'm the editorial page editor here, and I believe you met the other editorial board members. I also would like to introduce Lauren Dake, our reporter, who will be sitting in. She won't be asking questions in this forum, but might want to speak with you afterwards. And as you all should know, we are videotaping this for use on our website. We post all of our meetings unedited for the benefit of our readers. So we'll get started. And thanks again for coming in. We'll start, take a minute or two to introduce yourselves and give us some brief background, explain why you're running. And then after that, we'll get into some specific issues. And we'll start with Carolyn.
Well, thank you. I'm Carolyn Crain, as you well know. And background-wise, I've owned 3 businesses. I've got multiple college degrees. I've got trade school certificates from having become a journeyman baker in my life. I've been a union worker and a non-union worker, and I've been a landlord. So I've got quite a diverse background in employment and work skills. I've had custody of a mentally ill sister for 2 weeks shy of 29 years. Last year she passed away. That was an experience in and of itself, which gives me a huge heart and a serious interest in what happens with our mentally ill and our disabled in the community. I currently have custody of, well, I want to call it partial custody of, because they're sort of independent since I got them back on their feet a bit. But I take care of both my parents. Daddy's end-stage Parkinson's and Mom has Alzheimer's and diabetes. So they come with other interesting side effects that impact family dynamics. And open your eyes to what's going on in the prescription world, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, budgets, and just aging in general, and what can happen with us as a society, as people in our world of age. That's kind of my personal life. I've got a fabulous husband. He seriously rocks. He's just amazing. And 1 son and 3 grandsons that are, I'm biased, they're gorgeous. And that's who I am. As far as running for office is concerned, I've been somewhat politically active since I was 17, almost consistently, regardless of where I was. Speaking up at city halls and county council meetings, and in Olympia, or in the past it was Salem, and speaking to Congress people and asking for assistance in certain issues, and sometimes winning and sometimes losing, but that's the way it is in politics. Working hard to try to help all of us have a better community, and that was always my goal, and it will be tomorrow when I work for you.
Carolyn, how long have you been in Vancouver?
10 years.
10 years. And before that, it was Portland side?
Portland, yes. I lived over in the Argay district. I'm not sure if you know where that is, but up on the hill looking at Vancouver.
Thank you. Alishia?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to interview. So I'm Alishia Topper, and I'm running for the 49th Legislative District for position 2. I'm a native of the Pacific Northwest, and I actually grew up in North Clark County and attended Battleground High School. And that was really an opportunity for me to tap the potential of being a farm girl that I didn't actually know I had in me at the time. Was raised on a little 5-acre parcel with horses and pigs and cows, and I was a part of the Future Farmers of America. And I told a cute little personal story at a labor meeting recently that I actually am a reserved champion pig farmer. So very proud of that.
4-H?
4-H, yes, absolutely. So I took some of that knowledge and my background in running. Actually, the way I was able to attend college was on a running scholarship. My family grew up pretty much in poverty, and so really my pathway into being more professional and successful was through education. So I attended Washington State University, where I earned 2 degrees. One was in psychology and the other was in foreign language and literatures. During my tenure at WSU, I also ran track and field and cross country, and I studied abroad in Guadalajara, Mexico for a semester, where I could learn Spanish and learn more about other cultures. Did qualify for the 2000 Olympic trials as an 800-meter competitor. It was a phenomenal experience where my family, who was pretty disjointed, had an opportunity to come together and really celebrate success, and we went down to Sacramento together, and it was a memory I will never forget. But after I put all my running behind me, I came back home, and I actually moved and worked for Share, which is a nonprofit here locally. So my first job out of college was helping families who are living in shelter transition into housing. So it was a 2-year temporary housing program where I helped families find their self-sufficiency. And that really kind of started my pathway around fighting for issues around poverty, and ties into the work I'm doing now as a current city council member in fighting for affordable housing options and trying to find solutions for our cities and regions most vulnerable. The reason I'm running really was sparked from my work around affordable housing. I'm also an employee with Vancouver Public Schools, so I'm working in 16 of our schools that have the highest level of poverty, and so I'm helping to bring in community partnerships that are outside of the normal silos. You know, you think about housing and housing and urban development, you think about education and the big silos of education, the business community, the faith sectors. All of those have cross sections, and I think once we find the commonality and the goal and drive to help others, can bring those together to solve huge social issues. So that's what I'm doing for the school district, and I really want to represent the people of the 49th. I think with Jem Moeller leaving after 14 years, and before that serving as a city council member, we have a leadership void. And I believe that with my passion, drive, hard work, and commitment to the people here, that I will be the most qualified and best voice to represent them in Olympia. So I'm excited to share more about the things I'm passionate about and what I hope to do in Olympia.
Great. Thank you. Monica?
Yeah, so I'm Monica Stonier. I have my background and experience in professional work is in K-12 education, which is a main reason why I'm running. I think that's going to be a very timely issue facing the budget discussions and the policy decisions that will be made this upcoming session. Not unlike, previous sessions, but we're reaching a timeline here and a commitment to, with the McCleary decision, we're actually going to have to move on making sure that policies and budgets reflect the state responsibly funding schools. And so the courts have weighed in on that, and I think that is a pretty unanimous understanding. I have 2 children. My husband and I have lived here in Vancouver for 14 years, raising our kids here, and we really love Vancouver and all that it has to offer. We have spent a lot of time in our family discussions thinking about what is going to be the future of this community, whether it's in terms of transportation, education, or, in my opinion, I think one of the things we're learning about a lot at school, not only in my family but in our classrooms, is the impacts that poverty, as Alishia alluded to, are having on our local economy, but also statewide and nationwide. So also our aging population, as Carolyn mentioned, is going to be a huge press on our state budget, thinking about transportation, thinking about access to healthcare and housing. We have several presses, I think, not just K-12 education. And so I have experience in Olympia in the past and watched the debate and participated in discussions where one area of the budget would get pitted against the other, and I think it's really important to have people in the legislature that are willing to work really hard for a comprehensive, responsible budget that isn't going to slash other parts that are also responsibilities of the state. So my college education is I went to Western Washington University for my teaching certificate and got my master's degree here at WSU Vancouver. The state requires teachers now to either get a master's degree or a professional certificate. So I went to WSU Vancouver here to not only get my master's degree, but also that state required professional certificate. So those expectations that the state has of public school teachers right now that are unfunded and I believe beyond the scope of the reach of the legislature is another reason why I'm running. I think that we're doing a lot of things that get in the way of kids doing right by their students. So, other than that, my background in having served in the legislature once before, I think will also contribute to the timeliness of my candidacy, and looking forward to this discussion and sharing more about what I hope to see happen.
Great, thank you. And we'll start with education. Kind of the boilerplate question, what does the legislature need to do to meet McCleary? Do we need to raise taxes? How should they go about it? We'll start with Alishia.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I was thinking about this just in terms of our school district here locally, and knowing that 18% of our overall budget is dependent on our local levy. And that is actually not fair across the state when you're looking at McCleary, not only talking about fully funding basic education, but they're talking about equity across all schools, districts, and all buildings at every level from kindergarten through 12th grade. And so McCleary to me is not only about making sure that we're paying for the cost of teachers, but also paying for the cost of transportation, looking at what is the cost of maintaining the janitorial services that are being conducted in the landscaping. I mean, basic education is really maintaining the infrastructure of the system. And I don't believe we're going to be able to fully fund that without looking at new revenue streams. I know taxes are not popular and no one wants to see a tax increase, but there needs to be some compromise to meet the Supreme Court's decision of fully funding. One of the things that have been difficult in the past, I mean, we've been trying to talk about funding education since the late 70s with the Dorn Act. We've had multiple governors put in new initiatives, but there's never been dedicated funding streams to take care of anything that we've been trying to accomplish. So really, next legislative session is going to take not only someone who understands that, yes, we need to step up and fund basic education, but that may also include something of a levy swap, where we will take back maybe some of those levy dollars, which are specifically supposed to be used for enhancements, for extracurricular programs that are now being funneled into basic education. So the school districts that can't pass levies are now getting further and further behind. So I think it's going to take a little bit of creative tax swap. I think it's going to take a little bit of potential tax increases. Where those increases lie is going to take a lot of research. It's going to take a lot of compromise, because this is really a problem with a solution that isn't going to happen with one party or the other. It's going to take a decision where you're going to have both Republicans and Democrats having to come to some agreement that going to get to the end goal. And not a dollar amount, still no one knows. We're still trying to figure out how much each district is actually paying out of the levy dollars or actually paying out of other funds for basic education. So next year is an amazing year and a good opportunity for our state.
Thank you. Monica?
I think we absolutely need to look at every revenue option and decide which revenue options are going to be reasonable for the communities in our state and the statewide sustainable budget, one that doesn't fail at times when the economy's tanking, but one that we can keep in place.
So do you think we
longer.
do need more revenue
Absolutely.
to meet McCleary?
If we're going to have a budget that meets the requirement for McCleary and also meets the requirements that the responsibilities the state has, we're going to have to look at new revenue. And I think that an example this last session with the Senate Republican putting forward a tax for gas, people will step forward and pay the taxes for something that they want, and the legislature said we need a transportation package that moves people and goods in our state. So I think when we know that the money is going to what we expect it to go to and in a responsible way, there is an appetite for the revenue that will be needed for that. When I was in Olympia, I sat on the capital budget committee, and we had a bill for $700 million for capital for building schools if we were to actually implement the smaller class size initiative. One of our tasks was to call back and find out from our districts exactly what was going to be needed, and it turned out that $700 million was actually not even going to reach half of what was going to be needed to actually put the classrooms in place in buildings around the state. And so I think it's absolutely true that we actually don't know what the cost of fully funding education is going to be. We have a dollar amount that comes from McCleary based on the prototypical funding model, but there's a lot more that goes into it than just that model. We don't have the land necessarily to purchase for schools. There's a whole lot more that we're going to have to look at. And additionally, I would say that those who are at the mercy of education policy that comes from Olympia can point out to you a number of places where we could scale back in dollars spent because of policy that's passed. And I think that there's a lot to evaluate there as well.
Thank you. Carolyn, thoughts on McCleary?
I was at a forum last week on education where the assistant superintendent of education for the state of Washington came down and spoke and laid out the future, next 2 years anyway, of what is going on with education. And I found it interesting because when the federal government passed the ESA back in '65, it laid out some rules, and there was a solid reason for those rules. We've seen this nation change dramatically in the way kids are being educated in some states that were so impoverished that those kids were never going to climb out of poverty in their entire lifetimes. So there's a solid reason for those programs to exist. But they constantly keep changing, and it's kind of, okay, well, life changes, and what we expect from our schools changes a bit as life changes and technology changes. We had No Child Left Behind. That came up with a whole nother set of tests and rules and regulations and expenses that were not necessarily properly funded. And now we're changing again, and we're going to get rid of the No Child Left Behind and go to ESSA. That is changing the education's funding stream from the federal level all over again. Right at the point when we are locally in our state looking at the McCleary ruling. I was up in Olympia this last legislative session to testify on why I couldn't find all the numbers I needed to find on what was in a levy. Why were our school bus fundings coming under levies? Why aren't all the things that are truly K through 12 education coming under the general education? And having levies should be about, a magnet school, extra, something that we at the local level want to add to our education curriculum. And I thought it was interesting that the Office of Financial Management said that they don't have the numbers for the levies across the state. I'm like, well, then how do you know what we're doing? How do you know how many gumballs are in the gumball machine if you really don't even have the scope of the size of the gumball machine? And I asked our legislature to please pull all the numbers so that when they're making a decision and how we're going to move forward, we have factual data to move forward with. And they have done that. So now we're looking at things like levy swapping, which comes with a positive potential for our local area, where we are really high in the state with regards to our taxes and the amount of that goes directly to education. If you look at your property tax bill, on my house, it's a little more than $1,900 strictly going into education. I'm okay with that, okay? But I do think we need to be able to see what dollars we're spending and where they're going. And I think if we're going to hold the legislature accountable to fund education, which we need to do, that they need to have all of the data, not just some of the data, so they can see the entire scope of what needs to be done. And that's probably going to call for some hard choices. And it's going to call for a potential to change the way we actually even look at budgeting. And all of it's going to happen at the same time that the federal streams are coming down differently. So it's going to get really interesting next year.
Now, by
And it's
hard
gonna get
choices, do you
complicated.
think that means that other programs need to get cut to fund education
When-
or raise taxes or?
When I look at the final numbers, I can give you a solid answer to that. I don't like to commit myself to one side or the other until I see the data and we have the debate and we hammer it out. At that point, I'd be able to turn around and say to you, you know what? We can do this without, or we can't. The other programs that are out there also need money too, and they are very important too. It does not do us any good to educate a bunch of kids that we haven't protected. So we need more money and protection. We need to be able to get those kids to school. So we need to make sure that the school buses are running. We need to make sure that the roads are there for those school buses to run on. So the whole thing is a huge package, not just a little package. And when I'm talking about the hard decisions, some of those hard decisions I want to make sure we protect are the ability to keep your local school decisions local. I'm concerned when the legislature takes over everything, are they taking over everything? Are we gonna lose local control? I don't wanna lose local control over our own education system. I think it's critically important that it's properly funded, but I don't necessarily know that I want the legislature just to run amok and take complete control away from your local school districts as to what they can and cannot build. And I think it's gonna get sticky on that, because they're gonna say, well, wait a minute, we're only giving you this much money. And if you throw another school in, you're gonna change the amount of the budget, and we can't afford that. So I wanna be very careful about how we move forward, that we don't put ourselves in a box and take away our own control.
And one follow, I wanted to give everyone a chance to answer, but Alishia, when you mentioned new revenue streams, what would you propose? What kind of tax would you propose if it comes to that?
So I think there's been a couple options that have been put forward by the legislature. There was one bill to look at capital gains tax. There was some pushback. I think if that is going to be an option that comes forward, that there needs to be a harder look at what those thresholds are, especially for property owners who may use their rental property as their retirement income. If it's set too low, you're going to negatively impact people who aren't necessarily in that top percent that could afford the additional
But
tax.
under certain parameters, you would approve of the capital gains?
I would, yes. I think that could be a viable option. And our tax system in general in this state is fairly regressive. I think we need to start looking at a broader tax reform initiative. And
Meaning an income tax?
Well,
or-
I don't know if it's an income tax, because you can't necessarily have an income tax and a sales tax at the same time. That becomes incredibly burdensome on multiple levels. But I think we need to start looking at where are our dedicated revenue streams that go towards these kind of general expenses like education, and how can we change maybe, lowering the B&O tax but raising another tax that then would help make it more proportionate. I mean, just as an example. But I'm very excited to start looking at what tax structures we have in place that are necessarily not working. And gas tax, for example. We talk about the transportation infrastructure and all of the work that our state needs, especially here at home in the 49th with the I-5 bridge. But if we're putting it on gas, but yet we're promoting more fuel-efficient cars, you're going to start seeing decrease in revenue over time, but still increased costs in trying to fix the problem. So I think we need to start looking at it and having those discussions.
Have you all been on the podium together at all much this election season yet?
Just once.
Just once?
We were at the realtors thing.
Okay.
There was the right to be heard meet and greet too, but that wasn't,
Yeah.
it was more of like a quick
There
thing.
were so many of us in there that was like a 30-second, hi, my name is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, where I'm going is, I wonder if you can, starting with you, Monica, tell me where you differentiate yourself from the other two candidates. What are your differences?
I think in particular, I think Carolyn and I, we've had discussions before, and we know that there's a lot of areas on the political spectrum where we probably don't agree, but there's also plenty where we do. And then, I would say that my distinction is really my experience, my professional background, and the work that I have already done in the legislature and lobbying and advocating. I've done at the federal level for policies that make better sense in K-12 education. Now, in the short time that I got to serve in the legislature, I also got to advocate for other things that were really important to me as a Democrat. And so, I think probably Alishia and I would share many of those values. But the main distinction for me is my legislative experience and my professional background being the most timely in this upcoming session.
Yeah, so I think Carolyn and I, similar, probably on some social issues. I think her and I both care about issues around poverty and caring for those that are vulnerable. I think the differentiation in this race, though, will need to come between the two Democratic candidates on the ballot, with the majority of the individuals in the 49th being Democrats. And I think it's been, decades since a Republican was actually elected in the 49th. So really, I think the choice is going to be between who is able to stand up and lead on issues. I've been having the discussion about the differences, and I think if you look at our voting records and the time that we've been in office, so myself being a public official and elected to represent 170,000 people in the city of Vancouver, I take into consideration, one, what would the individuals that I'm serving want, or what's going to be in the best interest of the city. Also looking at what is going to be in the best interest of the whole, the collective. So I think when I think about that in issues like fireworks, for example, I was the only person on council who said we should take it out to an advisory vote. We should hear from the people. I think that there are certain issues where you should give that latitude and you should lend that voice to the people you're representing. But then there are issues that are important, like transportation infrastructure, for example, where I took a vote to make sure we put funding in place with a ton of community input and feedback and having, multiple perspectives and voices being heard. But that was a decision that we made because we knew that those improvements were incredibly important for the economic vitality, for the future of our citizens. And so, to me, I think the biggest difference is that Monica has taken votes in the legislature that should not have been taken. For one, not funding the transportation package to replace the I-5 bridge is one of them. The second, I think in terms of transparency and accountability, I hold that at a very high standard for myself and my own personal values. And I know when she was in the legislature for 2 years, she voted against a bill that would have accounted for more transparency, and that would have been on businesses who are receiving tax incentives and tax breaks. Here at the city, I helped pass legislation that allowed Banfield to relocate. But as a part of that, we put in transparency and benchmarks, and we asked them to bring in certain levels of pay for the jobs that they were bringing to our community. And we didn't do that when we passed the biggest tax incentive package for Boeing in the entire country. We didn't hold them to the same standards. So I'm going to fight for the 49th. I'm going to be a voice. I'm going to listen and be accessible. I'm not going to vote along party lines. I'm going to do my research. And I think that those things are going to be what really differentiates her and I, not necessarily the party platform per se. So that was kind of a long answer to a short question.
Caroline, how do you differentiate yourself?
Well, I'm probably different than almost everybody. How's that? I absolutely hold to a line of what is ethical and what is honorable, and what is good governance for the people. And that does not necessarily put an R on it, and it doesn't put a D on it. It puts what is ethical and what is honorable and what's in the best interest of the people. When I talk to people about the issues that are facing them, they don't have an R or a D on it. They're housed or they're not. They're hungry or they're not. They're educated or they're not. They have access to a doctor or they don't. I don't hear a political side to that. And I think as we look at politics, we realize almost everybody, and I won't say everybody, but I will say almost everybody, comes at running for office or a political position with a motivation that is good, or generally pure in their idea of what they want to do and why. Now, that's where the differentiation comes in, because one person's solution is not necessarily another person's solution. I don't look at a solution of housing as being something where you pass a special tax district and you start taxing everyone who is housed, which includes a lot of seniors and a lot of low-income people and a lot of renters that just saw a huge tax increase or huge rent increases. You don't, and those things are always passed down. A business doesn't stay in business if they don't pass down their costs. So all you're going to do is raise the rents again. That is not going to help affordability. You are not going to solve problems, and you are going to find a spiral of more people unable to afford to live in their apartment.
But you remember the question, right?
I do. I'm just giving you the answer. There's differences in opinions
But
of the
you need to be a little bit
direction
more
we would go.
Yeah, specific about
I'm being
what you look
I'm
for.
being specific. And Alishia would look to bring forward a tax to handle the affordable housing issue and homelessness. I would not go that direction. That is specific. We both have the same higher reason and motivation, but we don't come with the same solutions. My solution, on the other hand, would be to look at the state legislature and look at regulations coming out of the different branches of government with regards to mandates, to reduce the cost of some of those mandates back down to a reasonable level. You don't throw out the entire baby on the bathwater because there are environmental things you want to protect. But I don't think that you get so out of control with your mandates that all of a sudden you throw it all out and house people in little shacks on cinder blocks, and those people don't have any of those protections. There is and wherever you plant that little village is going to change the property values of all the properties that are around that. So there is a balance. Is it better for the people to live in a shack than under a bridge or in the briars? Yes. Okay? But at the same time, over on this side, we could find a balance. We could roll back the 84,000. We could make it 55,000 maybe, or we can find a balance. We're smart, we're bright. I am optimistic, and I believe we can solve this without having to make another person's income, rent go up while their income stays frozen. I believe we can solve this in a different direction. It's going to take hard work. I don't think any of the answers are easy.
Or short.
I think they're all going to take work. But I'll tell you what, I'm willing to do the work.
Okay, so how about between you and Monica? What are the differences, the main, big one?
She was there before, and she was there when the McLaren ruling was being hammered, and the solutions under her prior leadership did not come forward. So I'm here to tell you that I don't think that having the same type of individual sitting in that seat is going to be a solution to a problem that has been ongoing for multiple decades. It's time for a transition. That's the short story, and I think I can give you that transition.
Very nice. Is it fair to say, Monica, that you moved to this district to run for this office?
It absolutely weighed into the calculations, but it's not the only reason. And I think you would be foolish to make a huge family move like that, expecting that things would go exactly as you planned. Turned out that there was an open seat in the 17th district as well. So if I had counted on, things going just as I expected, then that would have been silly to have that be the only
Wait, so
reason.
you're saying you moved first and then it turned out that there was an open seat?
Well, I knew that Representative Wiley, I talked to Sharon a couple of times, and she had been committed to staying in the legislature for another term or two even. But I knew that she was thinking about retiring sometime down the road. We all know that Jim Moeller was talking about potentially moving on, and I had a conversation with him earlier on. At the time, he shared he was still undecided. That was as far as my conversations went before making the decision.
Okay, so I guess I know the answer to this question, but you don't find anything untoward about people who move around locations in order to run for office?
Well, I think that if you're moving a couple of miles from Vancouver to Vancouver, it's quite a bit different than perhaps other examples of people moving into a state and running for a seat where they don't know the
You
community.
mean like Hillary Clinton?
I suppose that's an example, yes. But, you know, I think that we have to be careful not to oversimplify things. No policy that I ever worked on in the legislature was specific to the east side of 205. And no policy that would ever be worked on by a legislator in the 49th district would be specific to the 49th. It's state policy, it's state work. And that's where my expertise comes in, and that's why I feel that it's timely for me to return.
Now, Alicia mentioned a couple of votes that you had taken in another district that you represented. Would it be fair to say that those votes that you took into account a political calculation as to how you voted on those things, and would you vote differently today if you were sitting in this district?
Well, I can tell you that, you know, that at the time, let's address a couple of those first of all. I think there's a risk in oversimplifying the legislative process. I've been questioned about.
I like that.
I've been questioned about, you know, supporting the tax preference for Boeing, and I can tell you that, you know, that's a long, arduous process when you're talking about figuring out the best policy to come forward when I believe it's shameful that the governor called the legislature back for a special session to offer a tax break to a corporation. So many of us were so frustrated with that, but the bottom line was we were called back to special session. Boeing had been failing to invest in their workforce, and there was a workforce training program and a career technical education program that ended up in the final version of that bill that I had advocated for and talked with those who are working on that tax preference. And when I could see that the policy coming out was going to have more that invested in the workers in this state, I felt like it was important for me to vote for something that I worked hard to improve. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of saying that the work that I did while I was there for that short time invested in our workers in our state. And if you oversimplify that and just look at the final vote, you miss some of that. Regarding the bridge, the position that I held at the time was when the economy was still in a very shaky place. Yes, I was representing a district that was tax sensitive. And additionally, I'd much rather be here saying I've kept my word to voters even if it was really tough. I think we need to have legislators that voters can trust to do what they say they're going to do. And so I'm proud that I kept my word to voters, but I will also remind you that the bill did pass the House and failed in the Senate. The House body passed that bill and sent it over where it failed at the hands of our Republican senators, particularly in this county. My advocacy for a bridge that is safe and moving has been something that people have known about it for a long time.
So you would vote.
Some of my loud supporters currently are huge advocates of the Columbia River crossing. Senator Annette Cleveland called me after I lost my reelection and asked me to continue advocating. He asked me to send a letter and to call the Speaker of the House and remind him how important the bridge was to this community, which I did. And so, again, boiling that down to just one vote, you miss a lot of the picture there.
But you would vote differently on that.
In these times when we have the appetite for a tax the way we just passed in this last transportation package, absolutely, yes.
Okay, maybe we should continue on with the bridge.
Well, and I'd like to add a point really quick. I think I actually have a copy of that letter that Monica is referring to, that Senator Cleveland worked to get by-state support and asked Oregon to step forward and take on the project. And I don't believe I saw your signature on that letter. Pretty sure I could forward it to you if you'd like me to. But so I think that is ultimately a huge project that has set our region behind for the next decade or more.
So what should we do on the bridge?
I think that we need to start with a small committee of legislators here in our area, get a couple legislators out of Oregon, have them work on a path forward. You have to have.
Didn't we try that and the legislature rejected it?
You know, I think when the Columbia River crossing first failed, it was so toxic because there was a lot of rhetoric around the light rail system and the tolling and the bridge height. I mean, there was so much that was compounded that it needed air and time. But right now, I think that we are ready to get bipartisan support of Republican and Democrat to come to the table, get bipartisan support on the Oregon side, have a discussion about how we're going to move this project forward and how we're going to salvage as much as possible of a lot of the work that's been done. The environmental review, a lot of the permitting, some of that can be saved. So I don't think it's too soon. We tried it, but I think now is the time that we can
Well,
do it.
and I think last year Liz Pike led efforts to get the legislature to agree to that. So why didn't the legislature go along? Was
So-
that because of her? Was it
You know,
because the
Liz
climate
Pike
was
and
wrong?
Sharon Wiley actually tried to work collaboratively to get something moving forward. But what I think was the breakdown is that you also have to include the Senate. It takes two bodies to get it done, and I think that that was where the breakdown occurred. So I think that it needs to come. It would be great if it would come from our Congresswoman, but I don't think that that's something that's in her focus point right now. So I think it could be potentially Senator Rivers and Cleveland who take it on, look at some strong leadership from the Oregon side, and then move forward. So I just don't think that all of the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted in that process last year.
Carolyn, what should we do with the bridge?
Okay, well, I'm going to start out by saying I'm not about to put in anybody's mouth what the Congresswoman thinks or doesn't think. She's entitled to speak for herself as our elected official. I appreciate her stepping forward in the last round and setting a foot down with regards to a bridge too low that would have blocked up river commerce for the lifespan of that bridge. We cannot dictate what the economic development inland from us would be. It would be an extremely unhealthy thing to do for a state. A reduction in shipping in a state that's a huge import-export state, it would be just such a mistake. It would really destroy our budget.
So
So as
if-
we look at a new bridge, I think what we knew before we wasted $200 million on the wrong project, is to look at a West Side project. It makes absolutely no sense to start construction on an already congested piece of infrastructure, which is structurally sound but overwrought with congestion, without building another access out of the area for the commute, for the span of the construction, and forward after that. So I think you start with that West Side Bridge that I've been advocating for forever, and you get traffic off the I-5 corridor where it's congested even if the bridge isn't this bridge, and you move it if it's headed for port to port, if it's headed for Beaverton, Hillsborough. You move traffic off the I-5 corridor out of the tunnel in I-84 and get it going more directly to where its destination needs to be. I also know that Washington County is actually considering that, and they are advocating with Metro to do something about their congestion problems that come up from I-26 or Highway 26 over there on that side. So we wouldn't be alone in that conversation. And it's not getting better. It needs to get solved. It needs to get solved yesterday. But tomorrow, we'd better get the conversation started because the next day is just getting later.
Yeah, Monica, we talked about your vote on that, but if you could wave the magic wand, if you had sole power, what solution would you prefer for a bridge? Just real quick.
Absolutely one that is bimodal, that we can get across
Meaning
the
light
river
rail.
with light rail moving into Vancouver. I think that
And you would prefer I-5 over a third bridge?
absolutely, yeah.
First.
Yeah, I mean, the infrastructure is in place. We have people who work in Portland and live in Vancouver and the other way around that are stuck on the bridge for a number of reasons. And if there's freight and cargo on there, then being able to move people in a light rail situation on bikes is, I think, timely for what we're going to have to be building in this community for years to come. Now, I recognize that not everybody in the county is in favor of light rail, and I can be sensitive to that. But I think that a middle ground is a bridge that's light rail ready, and we can invest in that somewhere down the road, but to take that into consideration in the design so that we aren't backtracking later on. I will point out that I'm not sure what letter the city councilwoman is referring to. My communication was in a personal email and was a personal request from the senator, and so I wouldn't have signed the email. So maybe there's another letter that we're confusing, but in my personal communication with the speaker and a subsequent meeting with him in Olympia, the content of that conversation was about advocating for the Columbia River crossing and making sure it was in the transportation package. And it didn't look like that was going to happen. Senator Cleveland has been a champion on that, and at that point was looking to call in all of her tricks to see what she can do about that bridge.
Carolyn, this is going to be a tough slog for you, right? I mean, would you agree to that?
Absolutely.
Would you consider yourself a perennial candidate?
A perennial candidate?
Well, you describe it. You give me the adjective.
I am a caring candidate.
A many times carrying candidate?
When I got asked to run for this seat by the Clark County Republican Party prior to the current leadership, I knew that it was going to be a marathon, and I understood that. Everyone said, "Are you in it to win it?" Of course I'm in it to win it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't going to be a marathon. I haven't run for any other seat, strictly this one.
How many times have you run for this?
This will be the third round.
Okay.
And in looking at the history of the 49th Legislative District, this seat has not been held by a Republican for 44 years. So I guess the answer is, if you're happy with the way that your district has been moving forward, continue right on. But if you're not, maybe now's a good time to consider changing up just a little. You know, I really think that we need to consider a couple of things. You've got a candidate here that would never hand over your sovereign authority to your region to a Metro Service District with the TriMet Corporation, that's a public transportation corporation in another state that you have no authority over. It would not do that. If you want light rail here, you build light rail here and you run it across the river and you get them to let you dump it off over there. But you don't hand them your authority. That's not okay. You're not in charge of what they do with the money. And all they're going to do is continue taking your money. So I think that that's critically important to understand. Having lived there, I am well aware of the functioning of that public transit system over there and how that system works.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to get at, this might have been my issue, drifting, but what I was trying to get at is, are you going to change anything from the last two runs, or are you still you?
I don't.
Or have you figured out that people aren't voting for you and I need to do something different?
I don't change me per se. I'm the same principled individual I was. At the same time, I have grown, okay? And I can work with other people. I have met with Democrats. We've had lunch, we've had breakfast, we've had coffee. In fact, I'll change this in the way I answer this to you. How's that for a good one?
As long as an answer's coming.
Here's the answer.
Okay.
So this year, the Democrats are going to lose the House. How's that for a prediction? The 49th has been represented strictly by Democrats in the Senate and in the House. Now you're not going to have a voice at the majority caucus table unless you elect Carolyn Crain. Then you'll have one in the minority caucus table and in the majority caucus table, and those two women are going to sit down and have a conversation and do what's best for the 49th. There's your answer.
That actually wasn't an answer, by the way, to my question. But I'll give up.
Okay.
Okay, I'll ask it again.
No, ask who they're gonna vote for president.
All right. That one's almost obvious here.
Yeah.
So please, no more than 3 seconds.
The Democrat.
For president will be
Yeah, president.
Yes.
the Democratic, yeah.
The Republican.
That's true, that was.
Yeah,
all.
that-
Yeah, that's pretty obvious.
Sorry, but it's normally a good question.
It took 2
Not
seconds.
this time.
Yeah. Real quick, let's try and stay on point. How should the state address climate change? What do you think of I-732 and the governor's initiatives? Monica?
I think that I-732 is the only opportunity we have right now to do something in the way of improving our policies.
So you're going to
regarding-
vote in favor of it?
At this point, I have some concerns about it. I'm a little concerned that we are looking at a time in our budget discussions right now where we need revenue, and I think there's a missed opportunity there to shift some of the burden and responsibility of polluters and really take advantage of a policy like that. I would like to see, I understand that initiative is budget neutral or revenue neutral. But I think when we're looking for revenue for every other responsibility, we really have to look at things in a more comprehensive way. I just met with a representative from the initiative yesterday, and we went through a lot of those concerns, and it doesn't sound like they're new concerns. They were certainly brought up in the process. But right now, I-732 is the only opportunity we have to make a move in the right direction regarding the environment.
Carolyn?
I'm going to say that I was thoroughly disappointed with Governor Inslee when he automatically vetoed 13 bills because he didn't get an increase in taxes. And it felt like all those bipartisan bills and all that hard work by both parties that were in the House and the Senate, there was a serious lack of respect. I think the environment is extremely important, but I think that our state legislature has told him cap and trade is off the table. And I
And
hope
what do you think of 732?
I'm telling the environmental issues that come along with what you're going to do with it is not okay for us. If you look at unemployment rates, do you realize they're flat? The employment rates have been flat. They're still backwards. We still have a 16% national teenage unemployment
But
rate.
how are you gonna vote
and
on
all of those,
732?
I would vote no.
Okay.
Put it together correctly so that it does not further harm economic growth or people's ability to get a job and not have it be a part-time job. The only job growth we had last month was 38,000 jobs in the entire nation, and they were all part-time, and they were all in the medical industry. We have got to do better than this, so there has to be a balance.
Alicia?
So I think climate change is one of the largest issues that we're facing as a country and as a world, and I think it's a start. I think the initiative will have some negative impact on local business here who relies on low-cost energy. We have several within the city limits in 3 of our districts, 17 to 18, and the 49th. So I think it's a good start. I will support it, but I hope to put forward even better options that won't be as negative to some of our businesses that really rely on affordable energy. So yeah, I will support the initiative.
Great. I think we'll move along. Give us your final pitch, why voters should support you, and please mention any endorsements that you'd like to mention. And this time we'll start in Monica.
Certainly. I think I've mentioned before that my legislative experience and understanding what happens in the budget debate is going to be really important when you're thinking about policy in the early stages of the legislative process. Making sure that we elect somebody who has the background and professional experience in the area of public education and a record of success in passing policies, even when that can be tough. When I was in the legislature before, every one of my bills had bipartisan support. It was important to work across the aisle to move the ball on issues that everybody could agree on and still be an advocate for the issues that I believed my party thought were important. I think that experience makes a big difference, and in the 49th, you're likely to elect a legislator who's going to be around for a long time. And one of the reasons that I'm wanting to go is because I didn't have an opportunity to finish the good work that I started, and I'm committed to following that work into its completion. So I'm hoping to return and serve our community in that way. My endorsements include the Democrats who are elected countywide here in this county, include the Washington State Labor Council, obviously the Washington Education Association. Would like to see me return to continue working with them on policy that affects kids in our classrooms. Vancouver firefighters, most recently the Latino PAC and the PACE, which are groups that hope to see and advocate for making sure that all communities of color in the state are represented in the legislature, which is not something that we see right now. Furthermore, I represent young, growing, burgeoning families that are working and living and enjoying Vancouver. My endorsements continue with most recently the Young Democrats of Clark County, which has been a growing and active group in politics in this county. And I'm hoping that we'll see more of those come along. I think we're right in the heat of the endorsement process for organizations, but I'm proud to have advocates from this city like Royce Pollard and Kelly Love, who's a former chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and folks that have been working for this community for a long time, have been strong supporters of mine from the beginning, and thrilled to see me shooting for a return to the legislature.
Thank you. Alishia?
So I'm very excited to be a candidate for this seat. I believe that one of the things that's the most important for representative government is to elect people that know the area and know the people that they're representing. I've lived in the district for more than a decade. My husband Ryan and I own our home over in the Houck neighborhood, which we've put a lot of energy and finances into to make sure that we're helping to bring up our neighborhood. And the thing that's important is that I do have elected experience, and every day that I'm on the city council is one more day of elected experience than I have from all the other candidates running for this seat. It may not be in Olympia, but it's here locally, meaning that I'm dealing with issues that are impacting the citizens every day. And that is an important element to me, and I think that having someone who understands that the policies you're passing in Olympia actually trickle down and affect the everyday lives of the people that you're making decisions on the behalf of. So I think as people start to research their candidates and they look at my record and what I've done, the way that I was able to help champion and build bipartisan support on city council for affordable housing. It isn't in our charter to address affordable housing, but it was absolutely imperative that we did it. And it's a time that every citizen in our state, not just our city, are feeling the impacts of affordable housing. And next year in Olympia, the funding that we use for all services around social services are at risk. We're going to see a major sunset in the deed recording fee, which will cut about 65% of our local funding for all human services, including housing and homeless shelters and assistance. So I think we need people who are aware of what local impact that the decisions that our representatives are making will have, and I will be able to bring that to the table. I've been in Olympia. I advocated last year for many bills, and as an employee of Vancouver Public Schools, I understand education and the struggles that teachers are having, and that we're going to need to make tough decisions. But we can't forget about the 45% of the students in the state who qualify for free and reduced price meals. They need to be thought of, and the decisions we make need to put them into consideration, because we can throw $3.5 to $4 billion to education, but if we're not helping those students remove barriers to learning, they're not going to graduate and be successful. I think the endorsements I'm most proud of, I am your grassroots candidate. I really am. I don't have Speaker of the House, Frank Chop, coming down to support me. I don't have a lot of the other legislators in Olympia backing me and donating to my campaign, but to me that doesn't matter. The things that are important are the hundreds of individuals here locally that have a yard sign in their yard, that have put their names on my endorsement list. Representative Sharon Wiley has formally endorsed me, and I'm proud of that because she's here in the 49th. I believe that the endorsement by the Washington State Conservation voters, which I received a full endorsement and sole endorsement, is important because of my advocacy against the Vancouver Energy Oil Terminal and the dangers that that potential project put our citizens in our state in. The other endorsements that I'm proud of, I have the Washington State Young Dems and Catherine Rich, who is a local advocate and strong Democrat as well. So overall, I think you'll see that my endorsement list has incredibly liberal individuals all the way through to conservatives, because they know that I will do my homework, they know my door will always be open, they know I'll do what's right and not what's politically expedient.
Thank you. Carolyn?
I am the candidate that will work very hard, does the homework, and looks at the larger fallout of a given issue. Takes everything that's possibly good about any given bill and looks at what potentially may not work and comes to the table and asks you, how can we change the things that may not work to limit the fallout? And that's the goal of any bill, to not pass a bill or to not vote for a bill, but then you have to come around and correct, because I'll tell you something, those take years to fix and the fallout can be really heavy. So I would rather get it done right the first time, which means maybe you take a little bit longer and hammer it out till midnight instead of being in a hurry to rush something through that's not done well. As far as looking at things that I'm interested in, I'm very interested in making sure that we do not take action on things that will block or limit employment abilities in the future. Our children graduating from college and high school here need opportunities, and we need to make sure that we keep that door open for them to have those opportunities to thrive. I'm very concerned about the limited budgets of the seniors and our aging population going up, and we are expecting it to go up. That light rail system is not going to transport grandma from her front door to the opera across the river, even if it's on this side of the river. The future looks at self-driving automobiles, where a woman like my mother will get a beep on her phone that says the car is ready. She will walk out, climb in the car, fasten her seatbelt, be told it's 7 minutes and 12 seconds to church on Sunday morning. And she will get there. And that will take a road. We're going to see a massive change in transportation across the board, in driverless semis all the way through. We may even see the cab industry go away as they modify themselves and become self-driving automobiles. We're going to see changes, and we better be prepared with our budgets to make sure we're ready for those changes and we meet the changing needs of our population, which includes some aging. I want to look at those things and make sure that as we budget going forward, we budget for those things. Those are important. As far as my endorsements are concerned, I have not put an endorsement page up, and this goes back to some of what you asked. As we all well know, the Republican Party is still in its throes of split and divide people. I'll put it that way. And I'm not trying to split and divide. I'm going to stand my ethical ground and my honorable ground, but I am not trying to split and divide. So I am choosing not to do that. I have a lot of endorsements, and I'm going to give you a list right now, but you won't find it on my webpage yet. I'm waiting. I've been endorsed by Senator Ann Rivers, and that is really, I think, a good pat on the back to me. I've been endorsed by Paul Harris and Brendan Vick. I've been endorsed by the Washington State Republican Women's Club. I'm their legislative chair, so if they hadn't, I might have been a little embarrassed, but I'm not. I've been endorsed by the Clark County Republican Women's Club. I happen to be their vice chair. I've been endorsed by the Republicans of Clark County, which is a PAC that I helped form, and I'm most proud of, because they actually do a really good job of representing the general population of voices and voters that are Republican across this county. And for them to endorse me, I felt was critically important, and they did, and I appreciate their endorsement. I've been endorsed by Vancouver Ford's John Crichton. Clyde Holland of Holland Property Investments, Bill and Oliver Hidden, just Craig Riley, Don Benton. Okay, so every process across the board. And therefore, I don't think I'm going to have a problem winning the seat. I even have a few Democrats that have endorsed me. So I'm looking forward to running a really good campaign and having no problem winning.
I have just one thing
Yeah.
for clarification. Did both of you say that the Young Dems endorsed you?
We had a dual endorsement from the state Young Democrats, and I have the sole endorsement of the Clark County Young Democrats.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.